Hello and welcome back to the Jessica Pinelli podcast. How are we going? I have just been interviewed for someone else's podcast. I'm in a chatty mood. It is client call day, and I was going to record this later this afternoon, but I was like, you know what? I'm chatty. I haven't even had a coffee, haven't even had any mushroom drops, haven't even had any cacao. Let's get chatting. And it's because on this podcast interview, I was talking about a certain topic, and I really felt called to kind of elaborate on what I was speaking about on this podcast. And yeah, I'm really excited to speak to this because I feel like all of you who listen or watch the podcast, which by the way, if you're here on YouTube, there is a huge percentage of you guys that come back, you watch every single podcast episode, and I love you for it. But I would absolutely love and appreciate if you could hit the subscribe button. It means so much. It pushes out my videos, it's pushing out my videos to so many like minded people, and it just gets me so excited to show up with you all and to have these conversations. So, definitely, if you keep coming back, even if you're a first time watcher here on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and go binge the rest because you're going to love it. But for those of you that are watching here on YouTube, just to state the obvious, yes, I haven't kind of deconstructed my microphone. For those listening, I've kind of got like the connection where you put on to the microphone stand. But because, and if you're tech savvy, you'll know this, but when you take this off, there's like a million bolts that you also need to put back together that takes so much time. I just, I cannot be bothered to do that. So this is how I'm going to hold the microphone from now on. Anyway, I have just been doing some reflecting before I get into today's topic. I'll be getting into some reflecting on business, my personal life, like really deep. And this kind of actually connects to the topic of the day, but what it really means to tap into my authenticity in a business front. Like, how do I really want to show up? And I feel that I've worked a lot on that over the past year and a half when it comes to my personal life. But for my business life, I feel that I have struggled a little bit. And yeah, I'm kind of discovering why. And so, perfect segue, I want to speak about self trust. When I was getting interviewed for this podcast, one of the questions that I got asked was, how do you create self trust? What do you do to create self trust? And to give a little bit of context, I was sharing my story of, my earlier 20s and where I was at, how I started this business, but really what kind of catapulted me to where I am now. And there's lots of little things. And maybe, I mean, let me know in the comments or slide into my DMs if you're listening to the podcast. Because number one, I would love to connect. I love connecting with all of you. I love, even if you're on here on YouTube and you write a comment, like, come over to my Instagram, slide into my DMs. I love a DM. I love a VM. I love voice messaging to connect. But let me know if you want me to kind of go through kind of the past decade of my story. This is what I did on the podcast interview. I'll definitely share it when it goes live. But I was sharing about how my mom passed away when I was 18, how I went to uni, I got my degrees, I was in the fitness industry, starting my business and everything in between. So if you want to hear an episode like that, I can just kind of give like a run through and maybe like the biggest takeaways from the past decade. That could be really cool. So let me know if you want that. But definitely a biggest takeaway, and as I was going through this podcast interview, was about self-trust. And I was saying on this interview, self-trust is basically like a muscle. You need to keep practicing it. You need to keep using it in order for it to get stronger. Now, we all know, and actually, even if you don't know, you go to the gym, you are doing leg press 3 days out of the week, and you're doing that for 6 months, your quads, your glutes, your hamstrings, they're all going to be stronger at the end of the 6 months rather than going to the gym and not doing any of that or not going to the gym at all, right? So you need to practice self trust like it's a muscle. Now, the question here is probably like, okay, Jess, but how? The most important thing I want you to remember when it comes to self trust is number one, there's no right or wrong. So, whatever I say, I need you to take what resonates, leave what doesn't. But I also want you to remember that it is a working progress. No one told me this over this past decade of working on my self trust, more explicitly, maybe the past like 6, 7 years. No one told me that it's going to take a lot of time. No one told me that just because you set a boundary once, twice, 3 times, you say no a couple of times, just because you show up as your authentic self a couple of times, it doesn't mean that you're going to trust yourself. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden you are full of self trust. It's going to take a lot of practice. It's going to take a lot of trial and error to understand what self trust is for you and what it looks like for you and what it feels like, most importantly, what it feels like. Now, going into the feeling, this podcast episode, I should have prefaced this. It's going to be a little bit all over the place, but more of like a download of what's coming through me right now. But you really need to look at number one, the feeling that you're feeling of the things that you're doing in your life. This is a great indication of your self trust piece. Are you always saying yes when you don't want to? Do you have a lack of boundaries? Are you feeling really burnt out or overwhelmed in your career or business? Do you feel deeply disconnected to your relationships or only some of your relationships? What is your relationship with money? What do you look like health wise, physically? It's all about the physical, the mental, the spiritual, all of those aspects. You need to tap in to the feeling. And when we tap into the feeling of how we're feeling overall, we will understand our level of self trust. And if I reflect back onto the period of time where I had the least amount of self trust, it was when I was between 23 to maybe 26, 27. Now, in that time, I did start to work on my self trust. So it wasn't like shit the entire way. It wasn't like a 1 out of 10 if one's being the worst. But that definitely was a period of time where I wasn't feeling my best self. I wasn't feeling like I was inspired by life. And I've actually been having this conversation a lot with my masterminders about purpose and self trust and tapping into what you really want from life. And one of the most important things is, are you inspired by your current life? Are you inspired by your relationships? Are you inspired by what you do, what you're wearing, how you present yourself? At your day to day habits, like, are you actually inspired? And so I really want you to start to think about, number one, am I inspired? But number two, like, what am I constantly feeling every single day? Because if you were constantly feeling like you are overwhelmed, you are burnt out, life is miserable, you need to be honest with yourself. Are you on autopilot? Are you just going through the motions? Are you just, you keep going, you're not really thinking about it, you just, maybe, and this is what I call good autopilot, maybe your job isn't that bad, you make enough money to sustain your lifestyle, maybe your relationship is like, yeah, that's good, you've been together a few years, nothing bad, nothing good. That's what I would call a good autopilot. Is you're still on autopilot just because things are okay. Like, you don't, life doesn't need to be shit for it to be an autopilot. And so tap into this. This is where you start. Forget about any activities or exercises or anything to do with self trust. This is where I want you to start. And until you've got this down pat, like, don't move on. Don't try to do anything else. You need to tap into how you are innately feeling every single day and how you are waking up feeling. How are you going to bed feeling? Does this mean you need to be happy all the time? Fuck no. I've said this before, but try be happy for 3 days straight. You are going to be exhausted. But I mean your overall life. If I look at my overall life and where I currently am in life, in my business, in my personal relationships, in my money, in my habits, in my health, overall, I'm feeling pretty inspired. Overall, I'm feeling really excited to wake up for the day. Do I have bad days? Yeah. Last week, it was my luteal phase. I was very low, right? And I wasn't thinking straight. If you track your cycle, if you understand your cycle as a woman, as a female, you will know that in your luteal phase, things go a little bit south. Things don't feel so optimistic, and that's fine. But when you build self trust, you can have those conversations with yourself, which we'll get to. But yeah, and even if I'm not in that time, do I have bad days? Do things go wrong during my day? Do things sometimes feel like, oh, I'm so frustrated? Of course, I'm a human being. But the first thing to look at when it comes to self trust is like, really, like, what is my overall feeling in life? Am I even inspired for this life I'm living? Now, going back to what I said about practicing self trust like it's a muscle, you need to be doing the things that is going to build your self-trust. Pardon me. Number one, are you setting boundaries? Are you saying no more? Number two, are you looking after yourself? Are you feeding yourself? Are you drinking enough water? Are you moving your body? Are you getting into a good routine? You're setting, like, is your morning setting yourself up for success? Whatever success is, like right now, think about what is success to you. Is your morning setting you up? Morning routines, this is the thing, they are so important. You don't need to wake up at like 4 a.m. You don't need to have 55 things on your morning routine. Your morning routine, like I've seen some ridiculous things on TikTok where their morning routine is like 4 hours. Fuck. I could not even imagine that whatsoever. I mean, if that works for you, that works for you. But no, could I wake up every day at 5 a.m.? No, today I woke up at 4:50 a.m. Client call day, Tuesdays is normally like my earliest day. Unless I have like a interview or something on and time differences with America and Europe and all of that. But no, you don't need to wake up super early. It doesn't need to be 3, 4 hours long. You just need to ask yourself, how am I setting my day up for success? This is part of trust, right? What are my habits on a day to day? These all of these things that are like you're probably listening and you've been doing the work for a while and you're like, this is so obvious. How often are you actually checking in? How often are you actually reflecting? Which is my third point. And last night I actually finished this. Oh my God, mwah, chef's kiss self reflection tool for my masterminders. So, my masterminders will mastery mastermind. It's a 4 month mastermind for busy, high achieving women. If you are looking to elevate your success or your fulfillment in your career or business, in your relationships, in your money, your wealth, this is the mastermind for you. It is both group and one on one support. The community of women, if you don't follow me on Instagram, if you haven't seen, go to my Instagram, watch my stories. I probably have something up, but definitely go to my highlight that says mastermind. Like, go read not only the results of what the women are achieving in their career and business and money, but also the community. Like, if you are looking for like-minded women to connect with, to vibe with, to grow with, who are understanding, who support you, but also be held in a container, a space held for you by a mentor, aka me, who is going to not just talk about the energetics of life, but the strategy. Like, how are you actually elevating your career? How are you actually getting the results in your business? How are you actually changing your money mindset? All of these things, like, definitely show notes below, whether you're watching or listening to this, apply for the mastermind because this space is just, it's incredible. And I just finished filming and creating yesterday a new tool for the masterminders. So, yes, when you come into the mastermind, you get instant access to this. It is a daily, weekly, and monthly reflection tool for you to use when it comes to self reflection. Because one of the most valuable things you can do is self reflect on your life consistently, because this is also going to build that muscle of self trust because you're always tuning into who you are, what you are doing, and how you are adjusting, how you are changing things. If things are going really, really well, awesome. How can we amplify that? If things are going really, really shit, okay, where are we changing? Because how many times have maybe you try to self reflect and you feel stuck or you don't know what questions to ask? How many times have you self reflected and you see, okay, something needs to change that, but I don't know what? The great thing about the tool is it gives you all of these answers. Then you come in to the mastermind and you have the support and you go, hey, this is what I've been reflecting on. Here's my monthly reflection. These are the things that come to mind. And I go, all right, here's a strategy. Last night I was talking about a one of the women inside the mastermind. She works a full-time job, but she's also starting a business. And we talked about social media strategy and her purpose behind, okay, why am I trying to grow my TikTok? I went through and I gave her some a bit of a strategy to start to move forward. And this is what, like, the mastermind is, whether you're a business owner, your career, you're a stay-at-home mom, you were studying, it's for all of you. But the purpose is for the busy, high achieving women. How are you elevating your life? How are you, if you want to elevate your life across the board, if you want to get to that next level, this mastermind's for you. And so definitely below, apply or slide into my DMs to have a chat. Now, as I was saying, a part of building self trust is the self reflection. You need to be able to reflect in a way that is going to be productive. Sitting down in your journal every single night and saying, okay, this happened in my day, and I rate this day 5 out of 10. And yeah, I can do better tomorrow. It's just not enough. It's not going to build self trust. And building self trust isn't like, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to work on this, right? I hear this a lot in the personal development space. And when people do inner work, it's like, yeah, I'm going to work on this. It's like, okay, now, today, I have really solid self trust. Does it falter sometimes? Absolutely. With new experiences, new conversations, things that happen that I'm like, oh, okay, this is expanding my nervous system's capacity. But mine's really, really solid now. And it came from working on it every single day. Now, a little practice that you can go, a tangible thing that you can go away and do is for the whole day, listen to your intuition. Whatever downloads, even if it doesn't make sense, go and action it. So, the example that I give is if you were driving home and there are two ways for you to get home, but you have always turned left. So, you're on a main road and you can either go left or right and it gets you to your home the exact same time, but you have just always turned left your entire life. Building self-trust is, okay, you get to the cross, the T junction, and the moment you're about to put on your indicator to turn left, because you've always done that, your intuition drops, go right. And most of the time, because you've always done left, you're going to think, no, why am I going to go right? And you're going to go left instead. No, what I want you to do for a whole 24 hours, and you can extend it to a whole week if you really want to challenge yourself, but actually listen to whatever gets downloaded, even if it makes no sense. Even if you turn right and you get to a house and nothing happens, it doesn't matter. That is telling yourself, your intuition, your body, your nervous system, I trust you and I'm going to listen to you. All of my decisions that have gotten me to where I am today, yes, of course, there's logic behind them. Yes, of course, there's strategy. And I'm not just talking business, I'm talking business and personal, but most of it is by feeling and tapping into my self trust and knowing that I can hear this in my head. It's dropped in my head, this download, or I'm feeling like, okay, do this. And it doesn't make any fucking sense. There has been many things in my business, like my partner supports me with every single thing that I do, but there have definitely been decisions I've made that he's like, oh, I don't really understand that, but that's okay because you understand it. And I'm like, you know what? I actually don't even really understand it, but I'm feeling this is the right choice. And eventually I will see why it's the right choice. It may happen really quick or it may happen really slow. But what I got reminded of in this podcast that I got interviewed for this morning is every time that I've listened to myself, it has worked in my favor. Not always in the way that I expected, might I add, but it has worked in my favor. And I'm not abandoning myself. Too many of us are abandoning ourselves to live out the programming that we picked up from our primary caregivers or our parents, our relationships. Too many of us abandon ourselves, abandon our intuition, abandon what we're really feeling, our authenticity, because we are so rooted, we are programmed. The mastermind, the phases, there's three phases, but the main overarching thing that we work on is subconscious reprogramming. Because you reprogram your subconscious mind, you're going to absolutely change your life. And this is the thing, if you were so rooted in a certain programming, you were always going to choose that. You are going to abandon what your true authentic self needs and wants and desires, because you're so used to actually abandoning yourself and doing what you're programmed. And so this podcast episode really just serves as a reminder for you to every single day do the things to build your self trust. Every single day for you to actually connect with yourself. If you don't trust yourself, if you don't love yourself, if you like without self trust, you don't back yourself. Without backing yourself, what's the point? If you can't back yourself in your decisions, what's the point? What's the point in it all? If you're just going to need the validation from everyone else, if you're just going to need other people to back you, what's the point? You need to learn to back yourself. And I said that on this podcast interview, you need to build that self-trust muscle to the point that if you're in a room with 100 other people and they disagree with what you are doing, but you can back yourself, that is self-trust. As uncomfortable as it is, as squirmy as it makes you, as much as you want to be validated and feel part of something, If you know within you this is the right choice, I'm trusting myself, I'm connected to my authentic self, then that is self trust. So put this podcast episode on every single time you need this pep talk on self trust and connecting back to yourself, and know that you know what you need better than everyone else, but you need to keep practicing that muscle. You need to keep growing that muscle. You can't expect to go from starting gym today, deadlifting 10 kilos, to by the end of the week, deadlifting 140 kilos. No, that takes time. That takes practice. I actually say this from back in my PT days when I was obsessed with lifting really, really heavy, like really, really heavy. So I take that analogy, like I understand it. And I want you to take it like you can't expect that. Just like you can't expect to say no to a few things today and tomorrow, and to look after yourself the next day. And then by the end of the week, you're at this 100% self trust. It doesn't work. It needs to be a muscle that is practiced all of the time. Now I'm going to leave you with that. It just kind of that just like ran through me. I downloaded all of that. I hope this has resonated with some of you. If you are watching here on YouTube, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. If you're listening, definitely slide into my DMs or take a screenshot, share it on your story. I love seeing it. I love the support. I appreciate every single one of you. And I will speak to you in the next podcast episode. Bye.